I tell them about a kid or a guy I knew by the name of Wayne Wilbanks, and I said Wayne died because he was afraid to be afraid. He got a reputation. He got hit in the head with a bullet, but it hit a glancing blow, and so having hit the glancing blow, it didn't kill him. Now he has a reputation to live up to. Guy pulls up to the beer joint one night, and Wayne goes out to calm him down. Has a shotgun. Hit Wayne in the aorta, blew him away. He bled to death before he could get to the ER. And I said to them, listen, my friend Wayne died because he was afraid to be afraid. And they almost all identify with that. And that's kind of the scenario that I used with the youthful offenders at women's prison, and the part that we're, as soon as we get this thing warmed up, we're going to show it from women's prison, where these youthful offenders are identifying with this and describing incidents that put them in that particular situation. You started asking questions just now. Still got it on your mind?
No, there's one question you said you know somebody that was.
To where this is, these two young ladies are talking about some legitimate fear. We're not going to show that, but one of them is talking about, I'm afraid when I go back that I'll go back to using. And what we say is fear should always drive you to appropriate action. There's a purpose of fear. And the purpose of fear is to drive you to appropriate action. So she needs to build a support system, make plans of how she'll stay away from the same group, etc. Notice in Scripture, for example, the woman in Proverbs had no fear for her household because they were prepared. They were clothed for the winter. So she had no fear of winter because they were prepared. And perfect preparation takes away fear. Isn't that why the Scripture talks about, I've not given you a spirit of fear, but of a sound mind, confidence and a sound mind. And when you look at that situation, if you make proper preparation, it takes away fear. The shepherd boy said, I'll fear no evil, for thou art with me. And so it's that kind of situation that we're looking at. Number one idea is to look at how fear and anger interplay. You know, many times people, in order to deny fear, convert it immediately to anger because it's not shameful to be angry among teenagers. That's the macho thing. But it's very shameful or intimidating to be fearful. Matter of fact, they're always afraid, or often afraid of the wrong things. There was a survey conducted, and among teenagers, the number one fear was, what do you think? Number one fear was public speaking. Number 7 was death. Rational or irrational? I say to you, if you have no fear, you're dangerous. You might walk out in traffic at midday. Okay, here we go.
I think I was 15. They were playing Russian roulette in his mom's basement. And him and his friends, they like always talked about it. I think they seen it on a movie or something. And he was scared to do what he was, but he was trying to like fit in and stuff. And so he was like, yeah, come over to my house. You know, my mom's at work. We'll do it in the basement and stuff. So they was playing Russian roulette and drinking vodka. And they were playing, they kept spinning it, and, you know, want to shoot it, and then, you know, how they put another bullet in there. So they had learned it from a movie. And it got to him, and he passed it up once, and they, like, really told him, he was like, you know, calling him names and all that kind of stuff. It was a big thing, because it was, like, real sad in our school and stuff when it happened. And, well, it got back around to him again, and he was just really like, you know, I got to do it. And so they spun the bullet. And I think it was like back down to 2, because they put him in and take him out, and then he pulled the chamber, twisted it, put it to his head, and blew his brains out, and left him there. Nobody stayed there with him. His mom had to find him in the basement.
That's a clear-cut example of a young man that died because he was afraid more of peer pressure than he was of his own life. You see, immediately, before they thought about it very long, half the class were raising their hands. And then I say to them, if a lack of fear has cost people their life, and fear has saved your life, is it a healthy or unhealthy emotion? Fear is a God-given emotion that must be used appropriately. And we go from that then to power thrust, which is anger control, and 4 times that anger is harmful to you. The first time that anger is harmful to you is when you feel angry too often. And that goes along with the idea that I'm responsible for my attitude. In other words, the kind of thing that Richard was talking about that glass being full. You walk in with that glass full, and it's going somewhere when there's pressure. And I say to them, how many of you ever caught somebody else's attitude? You ever caught somebody else's attitude? Did you like their attitude? Why'd you want one just like it? I say to the class, listen, if you walked in and somebody sneezed, would you run over and get the germs? But I say if somebody comes in with an attitude, you done caught it. And here's how it goes. Somebody walks in with an attitude. I say, some of you kids are more like thermometers than you are thermostats. Right? And with respect to our own attitude, we must have a thermostat, not a thermometer. But you've got inmates that constantly are like thermometers. They come in, everybody's cool, everybody's having a good time. What are they like? Cool, having a good time. Somebody comes in with an attitude, well, let's just throw down, right? Who controlled whom? You allow a person with an attitude. I say some of you guys let an officer with an attitude control you. You ever let an officer with an attitude control you? Say, well, he pulled my string. I say, why you won't be his puppet? Well, he punched my button. I said, why you won't be a robot? Well, he rang my bell. I said, disconnect the doorbell. An officer with an attitude can arrest any one of our clients if they don't get beyond this. They don't recognize. And I say, when you react with power to a man in power, who's going to lose? It'll either be a lose or a win-lose. If you whip him, have you won? Hello. So, it's like Richard was saying last night, if you don't choose your fights, you'll lose them all. Let me tell you about a time I got an officer with attitude. You ever run into an officer with attitude and almost catch it? I was in Gary, Indiana one time and got the blue light special. On a Saturday afternoon, I was not in Kmart. Get out of that car. Put your hands on the car. Where is your driver's license? I say, in my billfold. You got attitude. I'm saying, I don't think I'm the one got the attitude, but I said that to myself. I wanted an intelligent listener. And he just kept on harassing. And I thought, that sucker threw me a hook. I ain't gonna bite. Then he told me the probable cause for which he pulled me over. You know what that's like? There was a Caucasian up the street that had been harassing a couple little girls. I happened to be the first Caucasian along. You ever get pulled over because of the color of your skin? You sometimes do, but they very rarely tell you, this guy told me. I'm thinking, 2 o'clock, Saturday afternoon, Gary, Indiana, 4 of them, 1 of me. Ain't no time for me to start arguing civil rights. Right? I'm going to lose that argument. Now, it's not that we don't want the clients to talk about their rights or to defend their rights, but we do need to teach them there is a time and a place for that argument. And out there in the streets, Gary, Indiana, 4 of them, 1 of me, 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon, ain't no time for me to start a civil rights argument. I'm going to lose that. Now, the other thing is I begin to ask myself what I teach my clients. Because I'm thinking, I tell them how to handle this situation, let's see if I can handle it. And he just kept on insulting, and I kept on giving him answers. Tried to give him legitimate answers. Now, sometimes you have to remember what Mama taught you, right? And Mama usually has taught you right on these things. Mama told me don't ever get in a stinking contest with a skunk. Mama told me don't ever get in a heaving contest with a buzzard, because they already eat more rotten stuff than you have. They can throw up more stuff. You can kill that skunk, what you gonna smell like? Don't ever get in a mud-slinging contest with a hog, because both of you gonna get muddy and one of you gonna enjoy it. And don't ever get in an argument with a fool, because somebody looking on ain't gonna know who the fool is. Now, the other piece of information is this. If you keep escalating it, what's that person in power gonna do? Escalate. And you escalate it further, and if you escalate it far enough, then because you've escalated it, you have to lose substantial face or go at it. You see, I say to them, listen, if you don't prepare yourself for that and learn to de-escalate from the get-go and recognize that you're responsible for your attitude, the further you escalate it, the more likely you are not to be able to control it. It's kind of like the idea of trying to engage in birth control right before ejaculation. It's not that it's impossible, it's that at that point, who in life wants to? At that point, you figure what's one more kid. So if you're going to engage in birth control, you have to prepare yourself before it gets to that level. And anger, in many respects, has a similar parallel as far as the explosion and the thrill and the excitement they feel of letting things get to that point. And if you don't learn to de-escalate it before it gets to that point, you've probably caused yourself some real problems. So, number one time that anger is harmful is when I get mad too often. Let me ask you this. Have you ever found yourself just getting angry and all of a sudden you stop and you say, I wonder what's wrong with me, I'm just getting mad every day. You ever do that? And then you turn around and say, so-and-so made me mad, right? Who you lying to? Huh? How could you say I can't get mad as often if somebody else made you mad? Sometimes we have a debate on whether or not people can make you mad. Nobody can make you angry without your cooperation. Now, sometimes they cross value systems with which you'll cooperate. But the idea is this: if I'm going to get angry, I must take responsibility for my anger. I am ultimately responsible for the amount of chaos that I allow into my life. So I have to be sure that my anger is appropriate. Here's a little formula that I use to help me determine whether or not anger is an appropriate anger. When somebody provokes you, use the STAR formula. And the STAR formula is this: when somebody provokes you, stop. Put I over E. That is, intelligence over emotion. Because your emotional impulse is almost always wrong. See if I can illustrate this. A child in the early stages, his goal of misbehavior is often the goal to get your undivided attention. He misbehaves for attention. He hadn't been saying anything to a 3-year-old child, hadn't been saying anything all morning. Now the telephone rings. What does he start doing? Huh? Uh-huh. And what is your first impulse?
Shut up.
Shut up. Now, if all you do is holler, shut up, take no action, just go on that emotion, where's he going to be the next time the phone rings?
Same place.
Be on the talk show again, right? Now, his goal of misbehavior was to get your attention. Did he do it? Your undivided attention. He'll take it, whether it's positive or negative, he's still got a payoff. Now, so you stop, put your intelligence over emotion. The T is think. And the thought question you ask is, who is driving my bus? Have you ever allowed somebody else to drive your bus? And it's amazing, even in emotionally challenged and mentally challenged kids can get this. One lady was telling me after we had taught this formula that her 2 students were about to get in a fight. She said, Levi, who's driving your bus? He said, I am. Turned around and walked away. Another way is, who's renting space in your head ain't paying a dime? You ever go to work, you ain't thinking about work. Who is controlling your thought pattern? The person you're angry at. And so, your thought question is, who's driving my bus or who's renting space in my head? I have kids that are into right out of boys' school. And when I'm working with them, I'll walk into the class and somebody will throw a book on the floor and I'll say, young man, you need to pick that up. Screw you, old man. I don't have to do a thing you say. What is your first impulse when a kid tells you that? I don't know about yours, but I know about mine. Mine is, I ain't that old. But supposing I get in his face, grab him, put him down there, make him pick that book up, set him back down, and in the process I've skinned his arm. Now who's out of a job?
Yeah.
Now who won that power struggle?
Yeah.
The best way to win a power struggle is to find a legitimate way to avoid it. So I look at him and I say, young man, I'm going to tell you to do something. I'm going to stand right here and you do it. Boy, you can see it. Balling them fist up. And I look at him and I say, breathe. And I just wait. If he's angry enough, he'll turn blue first, but he'll eventually breathe. And when he does, I'll say to him, listen, I told you to do about the only thing I'm willing to make you do. As a matter of fact, I didn't make you do that, but I knew you had to. What I want you to learn in this class is you can get a whole lot further through cooperation than you can through power. Now, there's certain things I'm not willing to make you do. There's certain things you can't make me do. You can't make me give you adequate scores in this class without cooperating. I don't care, I still ain't picking it up. Well, you don't have to, but they give me good job security when you don't. They pay me for coming here. I don't think they pay you. And I go on with the class. About 90% of the time, by the end of the class, he's picked that book up. Now, they don't all get it the first time. I had one young man that crammed a 10-week course into 29 weeks. But by the end of the 29 weeks, he was volunteering to help teach to get some points. He had begun to learn that cooperation would get him a lot further than power. And however long it took him to learn that was his decision, not mine. And I had to allow that to be his decision. Okay? You stop, you think, you adjust. What adjustment can I make? Now, usually our clients teach themselves just two adjustments. Either keep your mouth shut or go off on somebody, right? And a lot of times they have other reasonable adjustments that they can make. Sometimes they do need to let it go. Sometimes they need to let it go until they've talked with a counselor. Sometimes they need to go through some kind of appeals process. And you begin to teach them that they're more than two just adjustments in life, and that many times they need to think through what their alternatives are. Now they are. And the R is the response. What response is in my best interest? Now, I almost always try to learn from my clients. And the client that taught me this was a client that had been arrested for 17 years, served 17 years. And he said, you know, for the first 6 years I was tough. I didn't listen to nobody. And he said, after 6 years I broke. And here's what broke me. He said, I began to think, you know, my homeboys who I listened to, they never came to see me. My parents who I didn't listen to, they came to see me. He said, I began to ask myself, who's about my best interest? So I saw one of my homeboys the other day. He said, called his first name, he said, we've been planning to come see you. He said, 17 years? Took a lot of planning. Michigan City ain't that far. But he said, I began to ask myself this question. What response is in my best interest? Now, here's the value of asking yourself that question. When you're angry, who's on your mind? The person you're angry at, occupying your mind. For whom are you responsible? Mm-hmm. In all of my classes, I've never had anybody that was there for exercising too much self-control. Had a boatload of them that's there trying to control somebody else. For whom are you responsible? And I say to them, you that are into spirituality, when you stand before your Maker, for whom will you answer? Is he going to ask you about that crooked officer? He going to ask you about that turkey you don't like? Who is he going to ask you about? Doesn't it make sense? Doesn't it make sense to spend your energy preparing the one you got to answer for? Make a lot of sense to you? So if I can teach them to start using that STAR formula, stop, put intelligence over emotion, think, who's driving my bus? Adjust, what alternatives do I have? Response question, what response is in my best interest? Now, I also ask them, if you had applied that formula, would you be here? And most of the time, they won't. I often say to you, nobody's in here for making an intelligent decision. And they start to get angry. I said, I didn't say you weren't intelligent. I said, none of you are in here for using the intelligence that you have. And they almost always are there because their emotions, not their intelligence, got them there. It's not that they're unintelligent. And I point that out to them. It's that you allowed your emotions rather than your intelligence to rule. And when you allow your emotions rather than your intelligence to rule, you become like an animal and society has a cage for you. You see, there's a difference of dignity between man and animal. If I throw a monkey a peanut, what's he going to do? Throw another monkey a peanut, what's he going to do? Throw another monkey a peanut, what's he going to do? I throw you a peanut, what you going to do? You might eat it, what you going to do? You going to throw it away, what you going to do?
I'm going to think about it.
What you going to do? Now in my class, by the time I've got that far, they tell them throw it back in.
I was next.
But notice something. Notice something. We had about as many different responses as we had human beings. But animals, it was SR, stimulus response. With human beings, it's SR, stimulus, interpretation, and response. That which gives you dignity to live above animals is that you have the capacity to make an intelligent interpretation which controls your response. Remember, responsibility is the ability to appropriately control my response. Now, the second time that anger is harmful is when you get angry, get too angry. Have you ever gotten so angry you got sick? Have you got clients that sometimes are doing well and they just let themselves get too angry and they lose it, right? What I try to get my clients to do, and what I'm going to ask you to do, is to determine what it is about yourself. What are your signs? Everybody ought to know their sign when they're about to lose it, so that you can start talking to yourself and say the right things to yourself. Now, I don't know your sign, but I know my sign. When I get too angry, I don't say a word. I just change colors. And I can feel it coming all the way up. And I have to start talking to myself. I say, Mullinax, your mouth could run 100 miles an hour, but your mind is out of gear. You best not say anything right now, because what you say will be the wrong thing. And if you do anything, what you do will be the wrong thing. So you need to take a time out, take a walk. Now, see, people have different signs. Some people that talk all the time, what do when they get real angry? They'll shut down. Some people that never say a word and they start clattering, what's happening? They fixing to lose it, right? Huh? Some people start crying. Some start cussing. Some start doing both. Some their eyes start twitching. Huh? And sometimes people start stuttering, right? And stutterers sometimes start talking straight. A friend of mine that said he stuttered, and he said this guy came up to me and said, son, could you tell me way to Columbia? And he said, I wasn't about to answer, and I said, he got right in my face. He said, son, can you tell me way to Columbia? He said, I still didn't answer. He said, the third time he got right in my face, he said, son, I said, tell me way to Columbia. And he said, you go right down here and take a right. He said, the guy looked at me and said, you go to hell, son. See, stutterers sometimes will start talking straight. Now, I shared with you my sign. What I want you to look at and share with me is what's your sign. When do you know you're about to lose it? Start right here, Tim.
I guess when I stand there, I sit and listen a lot to somebody's arguments, and I start getting involved in it, especially with my wife and her kids, how she's trying to get me worked up, and I'll start getting angry to a place where I may step in and say something, say the wrong thing.
Good.
I guess I kind of start to get fidgety a lot, start to
Fidgety
kind of
and
move around,
okay.
and
After I get frustrated and tired.
I start sweating and get shakes.
Okay.
Yeah, I start, with my hands,
And you know you better get out of the way now. Okay. Anybody else want to share? Yeah.
My voice escalates.
It's about time for break then. Okay. Now, it's important to share your own sign at times and to ask them to identify their sign. Because if they can begin to identify what it is that starts happening, and you get them to program themselves so that at that point they intervene. You see, if you do not interrupt power thinking, the system will interrupt your life. So if you learn the sign and you interrupt it, you have exercised power over yourself. And if you don't exercise power over yourself, the system will exercise power over your life. So you decide what's important. Okay? The third time that anger is harmful and destructive is when I hold anger too long. When I hold anger too long. How many clients you got that hold a grudge? And I say to them, it's not what you eat, it's what eats you. And one of the ways to get them to turn loose of that anger and that power is to get them to recognize they become a servant to the person they hate. I may be 100 miles away from that person, but who's renting space in my head? I may eat the best meal in the house, but I cannot digest it, for the person I hate won't let me go. I really become a servant to the person I hate. If you let somebody rent space in your head and you go home, does it affect them? Not often. Does it affect your wife, or husband, or children? You really become a servant to the person you hate. Now, one of the things I think is important in that is to teach them that there is a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is based on a gift. And if you give somebody something, what do they have to be to receive it? No. Oh, okay, in order for them to really receive it. But what do they have to do to qualify for it?
Nothing.
It's a gift. The root word is give. And if I give them something, I do it because of who I am, not because of who they are. Okay? So in order to forgive somebody, they don't have to deserve it. They may have done what they did because that's who they are. Story of a king that walked around and had sore feet. He called his men in, wanted them to carpet the kingdom. And the guy said to him, listen, it's cost prohibitive to carpet the kingdom, but we'll put you in a pair of carpet sandals, and everywhere you walk, you'll have carpet under your feet. And sometimes that's what you got to teach that client. You cannot change everybody whom you do not like. You're not that powerful. You can change the way you respond to that person so that you don't allow them to get to you. It's a whole lot less costly. And you can take it with you wherever you go. And of course, if you're talking to them on a spiritual level, you can ask them this. How can you ever bow your head at night and ask God to do something for you that you're unwilling to do for somebody else? Forgive me how? As I forgive. And then I ask them another question. Can you afford to hold it? Sometimes you turn it loose because you really cannot afford to hold it. You see, if you're wanting to get even, you may or may not ever get even, but they'll still control you. Counsel with a lady that would not forgive her father because he had abused her. She hated him, didn't even go to his funeral when he died. But if her husband came home 30 minutes late, she'd poured his food out to the dogs. Who's controlling her relationship? And there are many people, especially among youth, that are going from foster home to foster home to foster home, cannot get along with the father in that foster home because they haven't forgiven their dad. Now remember, I said there's a distinction between forgiveness and reconciliation. You always need to forgive. But reconciliation requires something on both parties, and it's not always necessary to be reconciled. I mean by that, if you were in a relationship, your first marriage, and you had bitterness and unforgiveness, you need to forgive, but you don't necessarily need to be reconciled to that person. They're already in a different relationship. Do you understand what I'm saying? And if your father has abused you and you're a young child, it's not always appropriate to put that child right back in that same situation. Okay. And a woman that has been battered, it's not always appropriate for her to go right back into that same situation. You see, because reconciliation requires something on both parties. And in those kind of situations, it takes something more than words. It takes a commitment to a lifestyle change that makes it safe to go back into that environment. So, when I hold it too long, and the fourth time that anger is harmful to me is when it leads to violence. When it leads to violence. I remember one guy I had in my class that was so unique, you're supposed to not be able to get refunds from Myers. He had 24 refunds. I used to think I was unique. I'd get pulled over by the law, be drunk driving, talk him out of it somehow, and have a weapon in my seat. I thought I was so unique that I couldn't get caught. And if I did, I was so slick I could talk my way out of it. And you know, you've got those people in your class that are so unique, they had their own route home. Took them about 7 miles to drive 2 miles to get home, but they had their own unique way. I've had some that had calculated the number of steps they had to be in front of the person at the store in order to get by with all of the stuff. And you know many of the tricks where they go into the store, take their old tennis shoes and lay them in the box and walk out with new tennis shoes. Or I'm not giving away the tricks of the trade, understand, but they also have a tendency to go in, put a television in the cart, walk up to the service desk and say to the person at the service desk, I didn't bring my receipt, but we can't give you your money back, we can give you an item of lesser cost and give you the difference. Now, I say to them, listen, I've had some pretty unique people in class. Had one boy that was so good, or one friend that was so good, that he would sit across and watch with binoculars the FBI who was watching him. All of us thought we were pretty unique, but all of us had one thing in common. The one thing in common was we all were there, and we didn't volunteer to come to class. So I say to them, listen, go outside, jump as high as you can. If you don't come back down, you really are unique. But if you come back down, you're subject to one of the same laws that all of us are subject to. And you may beat it 99 times, but on that 100th time they catch you, where do you go? And where did the guy go that got caught the first time? Oh, they don't give you an award because you beat them 99 times, huh? You go to you get exactly where that guy got. Where do you end up? And that's what I ask them after they've jumped. Where did you end up? At the same place. So no matter how slick we are, we all end up at the same place. No matter if you're 10 times smart as that cop, you get by 10 times, where do you go when he catches you? Now we'll move from uniqueness then to ownership And
Doctor.
David, you're gonna set up some stuff, or you?
Just a statement here that we're facing some in our department, is in this where it says realization of limitations, we're facing people using the internet for sexual purposes.
Mhm.
And the commissioner has had to do some very straightforward statements and so forth, and people have been fired and so forth. That's really become an issue for, not only for us in the department, but for others. There's a lot being written on that now.
You're talking about it
Just
just related to-
limitations, realize your limitations, and
Okay.
don't go to the internet if you can't bypass it.
Mhm. Yeah, and alcoholics have the same thing. You know, they say, well, I know most alcoholics can't ever drink socially again, but I'm the unique case. And so that's the. Now, we're moving now from uniqueness to ownership, and ownership is an attitude of treating others as an object. And David, you have some music with that?
This is a CD by Jennifer Lopez. I like to use her because a lot of people like the Latin sound, and also the fact that she's a female most of the time. When we talk about ownership attitude, we associate it more with the males because it's easy to find examples of males in music. Almost all rap is singing about, you know, you got Cisco's Thong Song, you have Mystical has a song called Fantasies. I got Know What Your Fantasies, where he's describing all these ways of using the women. And it's about using sex not for sexual intimacy or emotional intimacy, but rather as a form of control. And so, play this. This is what she's saying. I have to explain this because I know my dad can't understand the lyrics that well.
He's not alone.
She starts out singing the chorus. It's not that serious. I never put that much thought into us. It wasn't that I loved you. I was curious. Who did you think that you were involved with? Now, baby, you should know that it ain't that serious. It should concern you that I'm always one step ahead of you. Well, she's singing about a guy that is using her, and she's using him. Now, this is another example we give is that ownership isn't always one person using the other. Sometimes it's two people using each other. They're playing a game. That's what she says. She's singing about the game you play. Well, I'm just better at it, is what she's saying. And she's singing about it's all right to play a game, just be good at it. Okay? It's really easy to find examples from a lot of pop music. They're always singing about sex without love. Another good example that we use, or that you can show from a video, is American Pimp, where it goes through, and it's a documentary about interviews with pimps. And it shows how they say it's not about love. Pimps and hookers, it's not about boyfriend and girlfriend. It's about me getting your money. That's what it's about.
The exciting thing about the work we're doing is this. You know, if a physician interrupts or works on a person, he only works on that person. But the exciting thing about our work is if we break a dysfunction, we may break several generations and see that it moves several generations. That's the exciting thing. And the eternal value of that person, and the fact that you've brought hope, not just for that generation, but on and on. Okay, now uniqueness, I want to mention about uniqueness this. There is a constructive use of uniqueness. And it's not that uniqueness is harmful, it's how it's being used. It's being used in a destructive manner. There is a constructive use of uniqueness. And it does this. If I'm unique and different, I separate myself from others and look down on them. That's a destructive use. But there are some people with whom I have a unique relationship, and you have a unique relationship, and you cultivate that, but you cultivate it in such a way that you're not different from, but it puts more rather than less responsibility on you. For example, I may talk to them about in what ways do you have a unique and constructive relationship with somebody. And it may be a child that they have. Now, that person is counting on you to be responsible. So it's not that uniqueness itself is bad. God never made two snowflakes exactly alike, I'm told, or two grains of sand. But that you use it in such a way to put more responsibility on yourself, not to get out of responsibility. Now, the other thing about uniqueness is it's focusing on difference. Every group that you know of where healing takes place is not focusing on difference but likeness. What is the bond of AA? What is any healing group that you deal with? It's the likeness, it's the commonness. And as a matter of fact, plays right into our Christianity, does it not? The real uniqueness of Christianity is that he identified with us and felt our pain and then took us to a different level. And it's real important that we identify with the client in the fact that all have sinned, but also that we identify with the client in the fact that all can overcome it. Matthew 4, for example, gives the answer to that victim stance, one who would not be victimized by circumstances. And you have that connection. And in refuting uniqueness, sometimes you use 1 Corinthians 13:10. There is no temptation taken you but such as is common to man, but God is faithful, who will also with that temptation make a way to escape that you may be able to bear it. And so your situation is not so unique that it doesn't have the commonness that God can touch and deliver you from it. Then we move to ownership. And ownership, basically, one of the biblical counters for ownership is the story of the Good Samaritan. There are three principles in that story, and that is, and the principle of that story is the robber had the attitude of whatever is yours is mine and I'll take it. And some people have that attitude, like rip me off to start with, whatever is yours is mine, I'll take it. The priest and the Levite had the attitude of the traditional church, whatever's yours is yours, and whatever's mine is mine. And you shouldn't be in that mess to start with, and I'm going to leave you alone, you leave me alone. Our clients will not survive well in that atmosphere. The third principle is, whatever is yours, whatever is mine came from the Father, and I'll share it with my fellow man. And our clients get better when they buy into that principle. You have to remember from day to day, you can only keep what you give away, in the sense of spirit toward mankind. Now, just a couple of minutes on uniqueness. This is Mullinax malarkey. I've never heard it anywhere else, but it makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to you. When we come into the world, we're born into what kind of condition? A dependent condition. Come in, born in a condition of sin, right? I had people that will always argue about that. And I say, well, I had to teach my kids to share. They didn't share natural. Did you? Well, we come in dependent, fighting for our independence at the same breath, right? The first and most powerful word that a kid often learns is the word no, or mine, right? I'm born dependent, can't even feed myself and done fighting for independence, right? Now, when I move from dependent to independence, if I do it in an unhealthy way, I'm likely to become codependent. Now, the natural movement is from dependent to independent, I believe, to eventually interdependence. You get that independence and you find out life ain't quite as good as you thought it was all by yourself, right? Now here's the healthy distinction that I think you have to make that takes you away from ownership to an interdependent relationship. A relationship of interdependence, either one of you could survive alone and be okay, but you're better by being together. In a codependent relationship, either one or both of you feel like or believe you could not survive without the other. Now, in this situation, the other person influences your behavior. In this situation, the other person controls your behavior. For example, if I'm in an interdependent relationship versus codependent, it would probably be like this. If I come home and I ask my wife out to supper, and she says, no, I really have other plans, should that disappoint me? Oh, it probably should disappoint me. I said affect, influence. A bit disappointing. If it doesn't disappoint me, why did I ask her to start with? Why are we together to start? But now there's a difference. I may be disappointed, but I'll make the adjustment because my happiness is not dependent on her response. I may be happier if she responds appropriately, the way I think she should. I may be less happy if she doesn't respond the way, or I may be disappointed. That's affect or influence. The other is controls. If I go home, ask her to do something, she don't want to do it, I get miffed and bully around all evening and make life miserable for her. Now when I ask her to go out again, what's she going to do? She's going to go maybe and not even want to, and what's that going to be like? Or she may decide I can control that sucker and decide not to go, right? You see, there's a difference. And in a codependent, one person's attitude controls the other. And they sometimes control both ways. But in an interdependent relationship, where there's not ownership, there's that lack of control. And finally, there's a distinction in ownership between maleness and manhood. A male can father a child, but only a man can be a father to a child. If you got kids you're working with that think they can be try to prove their manhood by fathering a child, a male can, tries to control people around him, show he's in charge, macho. Now, there is with that maleness a what I call a criminal code, and the criminal code goes like this: never show any fear. Never show any fear. And don't take nothing off of nobody. And if we teach our kids this, we're teaching them to end their life in a hurry. I remember sharing this in a class, and I had a young man that hadn't listened to me all class, and he stopped and said, "You better listen to that old man. That's how my dad got killed." He had gotten into a traffic situation where he was going to control the situation. The other guy did something he didn't like, and he got out of the car and got killed. I used the same illustration in the domestic battery class that Saturday, and another person had a family member killed. That criminal code that helped them survive in prison became their trip back to prison, or sometimes took their life. Okay? And so we have to teach them a better way. I say to them, if you drive your automobile like that, nobody will ride with you, and nobody will write you insurance. I ain't gonna cause no accident, but if anybody pulls out in front of me, God help them. Okay. Tries to control others around him, exercises self-control. Run on through them. Wants to be a player, committed to his wife and family. Those are some of the distinctions. And so sometimes I give some characteristics and ask them to identify whether or not they were in a relationship with a male or with a man. It's real important, and often they will identify the fact that they were in a relationship of ownership that way. Now, the other thing is, the difference in this approach and some other approaches out there is we try to challenge their paradigm, not just understand it. That is, in understanding poverty, kids have a different frame of reference, a different paradigm. It's important to understand that. Ruby Payne does an excellent job of helping you understand how that in poverty when you speak down to a kid, they often rebel against that. But we have to challenge that kind of thinking, not just understand it. Because if he goes to the workforce, and I'm afraid the school many times is just trying to cater and understand that paradigm and cater to that kind of attitude instead of challenging. And what you'll have is a higher correlation of graduation and a poorer correlation of success in life. Because if he goes to the workplace and his boss speaks to him in an authoritative manner, that boss is not necessarily going to understand that a person grew up in poverty reacts when a person talks down to them. And he will let him know what part of the anatomy to let the door hit. Second illustration is a person that grows up into in a poverty-stricken situation. In poverty, they tend to treat people with ownership. My woman, and so forth. But when he stands before that judge, if that judge hears his story and he says, well, you got to understand in poverty, it's my woman. You know, my woman get a job when I tell her she can. Well, he falls on his face, and who then becomes dependent? I wonder who she's going with now. Ought to kill him. We've got a right to. Now that judge is not going to buy the line that since he was raised in poverty and treated people like he owned them, that this behavior is okay. It's important to understand that paradigm. It's also important to challenge that paradigm.
It's real similar to the idea we're about to talk about, and that's number 9, uniqueness. Uniqueness, like many of the thinking areas, has 2 facets that are linked together. The first facet is that I'm too slick to get caught. And the second one is the rules don't apply to me. Now this is similar to number 3, view self as a good person, for a couple of reasons. And the most obvious link between them is self-esteem. We get ourselves in trouble when our self-esteem is too high. We talked about earlier yesterday how kind of society's bought into this idea that self-esteem's a cure-all. We can just inject a little self-esteem in everybody, they'll be all right. And we have to talk about the difference between self-esteem and self-respect. This gets me in trouble. I ask the kids when this gets me in trouble, and I want them to remember uniqueness gets me in trouble when my self-esteem is out of control, when it's too high, when I think that I am too slick to get caught. I have developed the most unique, the best way in the world to beat a urine test. I can't be fooled. And I'll have kids that say, you know, I beat a urine test 19 times. So why are you here? Well, the 20th one got me. You know, or the rules don't apply to me. And when we're dealing with this, this is another one that our culture is really reinforcing and pumping. And I love to have them bring in music and talk about this one and get them to identify in what's going on around them, the thinking errors that they're buying into. And can they see these? I like to use the movie The Godfather. And I make the point with them, who is he really saying that the rules don't apply to? Whose rules don't apply to him? God's. He's so far beyond things he can lie to his wife and she'll never figure it out at the end of the movie. He says, no, I have no problem. No, I'm not in anything illegal. No, I had nothing to do with my brother-in-law's death. And he lies to his wife, and he lies to God. He lies to the priest. None of the rules apply to him. And when we buy into this idea that I'm different, that there is something about me that's separate than someone else, that I can get away with this, then we have elevated ourselves to the point we have bought into a dangerous lie. And that lie can take us into all kinds of places that none of the rules apply to me. I can't be caught. I'm too slick to be caught. I can walk in and steal. I had girls that had the beautiful plan going on. See, they have where they work those gift cards that are like credit cards. And they would ring all kind of things up on those stolen gift cards. And it was pretty slick because how were they to know? But they got them, they somehow, I'm not even sure how the store managed to catch up with them, but they had already gotten several $100s worth of merchandise. The idea was that the rules don't apply, and this is so slick, they're never going to catch up to me. That's the idea of uniqueness. And when I use The Godfather, I'll show them the cover on the tape. Does anybody remember what's on the box? The movie The Godfather? Huh?
I just remember the pictures are sliced different inserts.
What if I do this? Does it bring back any memories?
Yeah, pause.
Huh? No.
It's a guy with a hand and he's controlling the little puppet.
He's controlling a puppet. Yes. The hand controlling the strings. And toward the end of the movie, when the older Don is passing it on to his son, he says, I never thought you would be the one controlling the strings, manipulating people, the one so far above everyone else that you are God, pulling the strings, manipulating people to do what you want them to do, because the rules don't apply to you. You're gone. You're a God. And you can look in the face of God and say, the rules don't apply to me. If we can get them, the ones that are interested in spirituality, to understand the rules do apply. And if we don't answer for it in this life, we may be able to get by with it 99 times. But it's the 100th one that'll catch up to us. So that's the idea that we can use with uniqueness, or the idea of uniqueness, and some of the counters we can use, and some of the tools. Did you have, your music is for ownership, isn't it? I asked them to bring in music for uniqueness. Invariably, they will bring in music that has some reference to Don, such and such. I'm the last Don. I'm the Don. I'm the man in control. I'm the one. All these other people aren't like me. I've got a new spin on things. I'm too slick to get caught. And so I get them to analyze it, and they'll say, there it is. There's the thinking here. So I'll challenge you to use that tie-in and to point them in that direction. And I'm going to show you a tool that I use with juveniles. And it's a lot of fun to bring out the ownership, the latent ownership attitude that many of them had. All right, here's the game, guys. This is called the prisoner's dilemma. Here's the deal. Both of these fellas have been arrested for a crime. And like good police officers, we've got them isolated. I'm going to have one of you go in that corner and one of you go in this corner. I'm going to ask you to play fair. And when you speak low enough the other one can't hear you, as if you were in separate, being questioned separately at the police station. And they're going to tell their lawyers each round whether they're going to cooperate with the police and tell on their partner, or whether they're going to not cooperate and not say a word to the police about the crime. Okay? Now, what happens in real life situation if both of these guys don't tell on the other one?
Get off.
They'll probably get off. All right. So if they both don't cooperate, they're going to each get a point. Because they're both going to get off. Or at least get a lighter sentence, because remember, they've been arrested. So the judge has some leniency. So the police don't have quite as much evidence if they don't talk. Now what happens if one of them says, I'm not going to cooperate, I'm not going to cooperate, I'm not going down with this guy, I'm going to tell on him. I am going to cooperate, I'm not going down with this guy, I'm going to tell on him.
Both of them get hit.
Does he? Is that what happens?
Somebody
Somebody gets off. You cooperate, we'll give you immunity. At least that's the way it works on TV. I don't really know. Okay? So the other one who says, I am going to stick with my partner, I'm not going to tell on him, and the other one sings like a bird. Cooperates. Here we go. The talker is going to get 2 points. He walks away. He gets no sentence. He gets off. His buddy gets screwed. 0. Okay? And the other option is they both say, I'm going to talk. Oh, I'm going to tell on him. Yeah, me too. What happens there? They both lose. They both lose. Okay? We got them where we want them. There's going to be 10 rounds. We're going to see who scores the highest. All right? 10 rounds. Each round you can score points in one of these 3 ways. All right? So you've got a decision to make each round. I'm going to talk, in which case, if I talk, I could get 2 points if he doesn't talk. But if my partner does talk, then we're both going to get 0. Or you could both not talk, and you both get 1 point. So you got a decision to make, whether or not you trust your partner in crime. So one of you, if you would, go back to the back corner, and the other one up here in this corner. Look at them, breaking the rules already. I knew I had the criminals. I knew I had them. All right, we need the respective lawyers to go to them. If you would go all the way back where you can't see him, I need their respective lawyers. Okay. Representing our first client, what do we got, Bill? Is he talking or not?
He's going to talk.
He's going to talk.
No, we're not talking.
You're not talking. So your guy walks, your guy gets screwed. All right. You're a great lawyer. Good job. All right, round 2.
Better do better this time.
Score's 2-0.
That's why he's court appointed.
All right, come on forward. All right, he went first last time. What's your client going to do?
We're going to talk.
You're going to talk. You're going to cooperate with the police. What's your client going to do?
We're going to cooperate also.
All right, no points for either one of you. Go on back, round 3. What do you got, Ray?
We're going to cooperate as usual. We're going to fight this thing.
You're going to what?
We are not going to cooperate.
You're not going to cooperate.
No.
Holy moly, okay.
Learn each other.
Ray got 2 points.
That's amazing.
Again, next round, 7. Come on in. Come on in. Let's see what's going on then.
Bring these clients forward so that we can send them to Georgia and get them executed.
Yeah.
Bill?
I could be half
Bill?
Okay.
Bill? What you got, Ray?
Talk time.
Talking. What are you doing?
We're going to go ahead and talk.
You're going to go ahead and talk. Okay, 0s, locked in. All right, everybody take their seats. Congratulations, you both got the high score of 2 for a combined score of 4, one of the lowest I've ever had.
So you get 18.
Both of your clients lost because they got sold out. Notice what happened. In the first round, somebody tried to cooperate. This the only way this can happen, 2-0, is one person said, I'm going to trust you. Smitty, that was your philosophy. Where you at? Smitty, that was your philosophy, wasn't it? We're going to try to score this together, 10 each.
Yeah.
Combined score of 20.
Yeah.
Your philosophy was,
The name of the game, get down first.
I'm gonna get mine. I'm gonna get mine.
And that changed my attitude.
And that changed your attitude. We said right in here, I asked you the question, what are they afraid to do? What is it? Trust. They're afraid to be vulnerable. And when you tried to be vulnerable, you came around and said, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to extend a hand. How was he treated? He got the car door slammed on that hand.
That was my lawyer's idea.
Yeah. You came back and said, I told you so.
But I went on past history.
Yeah.
If
And
it
you-
had changed right there, I would have very possibly, but when he changed there, I told Ray, I said, let's give him one more chance on 7.
Uh-huh.
And if he doesn't talk,
Then we'll keep going.
Then we'll try to see how it goes. But I knew how many points I was gonna have.
You weren't going to risk it again.
I was even right there, so I said, hey, we've got nothing.
You weren't about to risk vulnerability again. Your lawyer talked you into it, and you weren't going for it ever again.
Not until he showed me he was with it.
Now, we can take the game away, and how far are we from our philosophy on life? This little fun game of us laughing and hee-hawing for the past 10 minutes, and Bill mumble-mouthing around, has shown us, by and large, our philosophy on life, hasn't it? I will try to trust you once. I will extend cooperation, and if you slam that door, my hand in the door, I'm going to tell you something. You're going to have to walk a long way to come back and get me to trust you again. And Smitty says, yeah, matter of fact, I saw he was willing to trust me here, but he had to prove it. He had to do it again. The attitude was, people are objects to be used for my pleasure. I'm going to use you to get me out of jail for my best interest. What do we use people for? Very rare we use people to get out of jail, but we will use them for sex. We will use them for money. We will put them in our congregation. We'll be glad to have them attend chapel so that our numbers look good on our report. What do we use people for? What do we get out of it? And the flip side is, particularly when you're working with females who tend to be on the underside of this relationship, the one being used, what do they get out of it? What do you get out of selling a part of yourself and being owned? Well, you get self-esteem. You get security. You get somebody taking care of you. And we will have offenders who say, yeah, I'll let the other guy score high, 20 points. I don't care. Why? Because now they're going to be taken care of. When they get their candy, at the end of the day, they'll share. Because you helped me out. So we can explore, use this little tool of fun and games to explore what is really the attitude underneath. And let's talk about what thinking is driving this. And it's the same thinking you use in relationships. And the same thinking that landed you a lot of times right where we are.